some of these woodland species do fine. So we have a lot of places where black walnuts have been planted because they were desirable. So we have an echo of black walnuts in our landscape. Okay, never too many leaves. And this is what this area looks like today, looking down out into this ravine forest that you saw, all that ivy. There are things that have been added back. That's what we were starting with, but really nothing. And what basically the process here was clearing out all the invasives, planting understory trees, many of which we'll talk about: Halesia, silver bells, Fraser magnolias, sassafras, all sorts of understory, mid-story trees, lots of those. And now we're getting to the woodland wildflowers, a lot of shrubs, rhodos, mountain laurels, native azaleas, etc. So that's what we look at. If you happen to like to add this stuff, mulch that's ground up wood chips from tree trimming operations, and this is not for the faint of heart or weak of shoulder, mind you. I have a hidden weapon in Tim because he likes moving mulch, and he really believes in it. Yeah.
Does mulch have to be aged? I have been told that raw, if you will, it will, if not complete, tie up nitrogen.
It all depends on where the heck you're spreading it. That's a really common thought. If you're just putting it around shrubs and trees, the research is suggesting now it will not make any real difference. With herbaceous perennials, you wouldn't want to be throwing fresh wood chips around those crowns because it takes up just a little bit of nitrogen. But the harder thing is not to just cover over the crowns with fresh, so it doesn't need to be aged. I've forgotten her last name, a professor at Cornell who kind of debunked that don't use fresh wood chip myth with some research on it, yeah.
Till the mulch into the soil or just leave it on the top?
Leave it on the top, and you would be amazed. Quickly it breaks down. Nature does the work for you, whether it's leaves or mulch. It breaks down quickly, and what you end up with, and within a year, as you go out there, you've got a layer of wonderful decomposed material that then you can mix in down below to the nasty clayey bits or whatever you hit. Mix it up as you're planting whatever it is you're planting. Yeah.
How thickly should you spread it?
You don't want to have. Yeah, no more than 4, I would say 3. My husband, the professor of botany, he loves putting mulch out, and I'll say, we don't need any more. He says, yes, oh, but I saw the tree trimmers down the way, I mean, but a little extra is not going to hurt. What you don't want to do is pack it up against your shrubs, the woody parts of your shrubs, pack it against your trees, forget the volcano thing. You want to keep it away, and you don't want to throw it all around, some planted area. So 2 to 3 inches. What you will get is questions, or we get questions on my garden colleagues and I are on a call-in radio program that goes across South Carolina. And we do get questions, well, what about the voles, and my colleague, John Bodiford, is Mr. Mulch. He's always preaching the virtues of mulching. Some people worry about snakes, it's just like...
Yeah, we spread mulch early in the spring, and this year we've had so many mosquitoes. Do they keep the moisture and the mosquitoes free in the mulch too?
What we have now, the question was about mosquitoes. Did others have mosquito issues this year? It's more a climatic, more of a weather thing. What's happened is is that we have been invaded by Asian tiger mosquitoes, those little stripy black and white ones that fly during the day. They're no longer the benign ones that are only at night. These guys, they can breed in like minuscule amounts of water. So I don't know if those were what you were having.
Probably because during the day,
They're awful. Yeah, we've had, and it's more likely, it's not the mulch, it's the weather patterns that you particularly had. We didn't have them that badly this summer, but we have had, so, yeah.
I will ask the most of the bone question. Is there a good way to control these? I've had some wonderful native plants that were existing, and they just, molds and balls, and something that eats them. The Carolina lilies, get a cat. Well, I've got a moth, but I got to took care of all of that, and I've got too many molds and balls. Get a second cat. Get a female cat who works for a living. I have 4, and they got rid of all the bowls and molds. It was like every day, munch, and they ate them, and I don't have any in my yard at all.
Well, there's terrible trade-offs here with, this has been a bad vole year. Everyone has voles, and they cycle in numbers. It's a bad year for voles. We want to keep our cats indoors because of the birds, but I'll tell you, those outdoor kitties, we have kitties on either side of our little house in Asheville. We're talking serious predators out there, and they're taking care of them. So, Kathy Bridges, my colleague at the garden, we're having issues in the Botanical Garden, South Carolina Botanical Garden at Clemson. We've got a lot of plant material there. She's using those electronic noise plugs, and she thinks they work for now. I don't know. She was just telling me about that the other day.
Somebody mentioned if you put some gravel in holes when you plant things.
That's another possibility. You put in things like permatil, that's exploded rock substrate stuff that you can mix into your planting beds with grit and that kind of thing. I haven't. We get asked this all the time. It's just real, and that they do cycle. You can also put cages around the roots of things you plant. Sometimes this becomes really problematic and time-consuming. Yeah.
In managing the soil, I've heard that you should put sand into this, mix sand into it because it stops the clay from clumping and allows more of that percolation.
We generally, in this part of the world, encourage people to add compost, leaves, and organic matter to clayey soils to up the ability of the soil to hold water. You're wanting to break the clay particles' tendency to stick together and aerate it, and about half of good soil should have space for air and water. Adding sand can work in many types of clay. What you also will often hear is that clay and sand simply make brick. And some kinds of clay in our area do, in fact, don't respond that well to sand. Sand is heavy too. I've used plenty of sand, in different, particularly for things I wanted to have good drainage. It's a lot harder to add sand in quantities that you need compared to leaves, if you can get these loads of mulch and stuff. Yeah.
You just look smart in so many ways, but one of the things about doing this stuff up front as opposed to coming to it too late after you already started working the soil and you realize how poor it is. And so I just do a shovel at a time.
Absolutely.
I fill up whatever it is from the kitchen, and it's in a smelly Tupperware container. Take it out, I just dig a hole, I dump it in, and then
perfect.
Over the top. And,
yeah.
I've got good soil in 6 months.
Yeah, and that's sort of a method. What Susan's talking about is a sort of like pit composting or lasagna gardening. Don't let any vegetable scraps leave your landscape either, And you can do it, amending it one at a time. Yeah, you see these silly magazines, or not silly, they're very good, or a book. You say, oh yeah, get out the tiller and do all this stuff in advance. Whoever does that, we want to plant when we move into our new house or whatever. Yeah.
If you don't have free mulch, I've heard people say use cardboard or newspaper underneath and put the mulch on top. Is that okay, or are there
cardboard's a great, in paper too, for that matter, is a great soil. What we're really using it not so much as an amendment. It's the could be a brown component, kind of like leaves and compost, and but we really put it down generally to suppress weeds first before we dump the mulch. But no, it'll break down just fine. I have a lot of confidence in the power of microorganisms to break down it, and if you're not growing vegetables, then it's yeah.
Last year I started a new garden and I had heard about this cardboard trick. So I did the soil off, amended the soil, then I put the cardboard down, cut holes in it, planted the plants. You know what I did? I created a wonderful place for the voles to go under the cardboard and eat the roots of all the plants that I have planted. So I am not a fan of putting down cardboard.
Well, there are all kinds of, and we all, as gardeners, and native plant gardeners and vegetable, whatever kind of gardeners in different areas of our lives we are. We're also practicing, restoring landscapes too, in our gardening activities. I think we have to realize too that every season is different. There's always a new season. Some years we have a lot of voles. Some years we have a ton of rain. Other years we have drought. Sometimes we have heat. Things vary and we don't always know, but trying to think like nature and having it recover. Some of you, I'll just make an aside, some of you probably heard about, we had significant flood issues at the South Carolina Botanical Garden a year ago in July. We had so much rain that summer, the water, everything was saturated, then we had a 7-inch downpour. I was up in Asheville and I saw posted on the garden's Facebook page this overflow of the pond looking like a mountain stream. This was a couple of days before the flood. I thought, whoa. And then just a few days later, we had this 7-inch deluge. It just breached the dam and washed all down where these woodland gardens were. But what's happened is that they had tremendous resilience. A lot of those plants came back. They're used to being flooded and that kind of thing. So these ground layers that are in a rich cove forest or a cove, there are floods that nature throws at these plants, not just oddities. So what we're doing here is creating those layers. We're looking at trees first, shrubs, understories, herbs, and you may be starting at any one of those spots or any one of those places in any one of the kinds of little woodland patches that you're doing. And one of the, if you don't know most of our native trees, it's always useful to kind of pay attention to that. We like to overlook very common trees like tulip poplars or white oaks or hickories. When have you ever seen a hickory for sale? Well, hickories are generally planted themselves, but these are great. These are part of our overstory woodlands forests. People love to hate sweet gums, especially if they've planted them next to their driveway. I just tell people to plant sweet gums somewhere they're not going to be bothered by the sweet gum balls. Goldfinches love their seeds. They're beautiful fall color. They grow fast. I really. What's that?
They plant themselves.
They plant themselves, and that's the nature of plants, of course. As they reseed, they're reproducing, and what we've found in both is, and as you get more, things like black gum or sassafras, you get more seedlings, and you do have to, and that's what's happening in natural woodlands too. And they don't all make it. Survivorship's usually low, so don't feel bad about pulling them up. Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah. Well, either one. Yeah. You can go ahead.
I just was wondering. We use the term sweet gum and black gum. They're totally
unrelated. Yeah, they're unrelated trees.
Are they even in the same family or related?
You know, I'm not remembering. No, take a look at these fruits. This is the black gum fruit is a little, what's called a drupe, a little fleshy berry, high in lipids. Look at that fruit for the sweet gum. It's totally different. And fruits and flowers are how we classify plants. And I'm not remembering the family off the bat, but they're not really related. And for chewing, because it's got a sweet gum. It's, yeah.
I understand there's some sort of a decline in the red oak family.
There's something that's affecting red oaks. That's some kind of wilt, is what I'm remembering. We're seeing a lot of echo death in red oaks across the mountains in Piedmont, where probably because of the drought, then too much rain, and then weird, it will result in sort of odd declines. Personally, I don't really worry about that kind of thing. If it dies, I plant something else. You can be really afraid of dogwood anthracnose, for instance, but they're beautiful trees, they're four-season interest. Red oaks are generally available as ball and burlap adult trees, or you can transplant young ones too. Same thing with white oaks. American beech isn't sold very much, but we really should be growing more of it because it's beautiful as a young tree as well as an older tree. Sassafras is not available that much, but is a great tree if you have it. These little berries are great for the fall migrants because they also are fat rich and energy rich. This tree here, we have an absolutely huge one that's only 20 years old, but it was big at 10 years. So.
That's a sassafras?
This is a sassafras. And sassafras, they're male and female, and they have beautiful yellow flowers in the spring, and the males are showier than the females, but both are really attractive. They tend to sucker and form little colonies, which is, you can kind of keep them confined. We've transplanted a lot of them. They're really great trees. Sourwoods, Fraser magnolia, American holly, these are all great native trees for different sorts of areas. Just mentioned flowering dogwood. Redbuds are another understory tree. Both dogwoods, redbuds are what are called, they're mid-canopy trees, but small. They both do really well. Redbuds will drive you nuts with reseeding, but you know what? That's what plants do. Whether they're native or not native, that's how, that's what they're doing. Some other beautiful understory trees, amelanchiers. Do some of you grow amelanchiers? Yeah, it's a wonderful tree. Silver bell also, there are a couple different species. And I don't know why we don't see more. We have a couple of different amelanchier species, but I don't see why we don't see more of them. Just some shrubs, yeah. I'm sorry?
Is now the time to plant redbuds?
Now is a great time to plant almost anything that's is a shrub or a tree or a herbaceous perennial, because in fall we tend to have much more uniform, of course now we have a killing frost tomorrow or something, but much more uniform temperatures than we do in the spring. And the soil is still quite warm. It's generally pretty moist. We're fortunate in this part of the world to have rain that's pretty evenly spread throughout the year. We don't normally have to deal with lots of long dry spells. So now is a great time to be planting shrubs. Like we just had our big plant sale last weekend at the garden. You know, there's the big Native Plant Society sale next month in Greenville. They just had it at BGA up in Asheville. This is you know, we plug, follows for planting, yeah.
I have a question. The mayor cuts my trees and he's real trees. He's going to plant some large trees.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to do it this fall. He told me he wanted to put it off until early spring because we're supposed to get a really, really cold winter, according to the almanac, etc. So what's your opinion about that? Since you probably know more than me.
I do not control the weather, I'll tell you. It is, you know, I have had so many people tell me it's going to be a really cold winter. Here are the things, you know, we can decide who we want to believe and whether we really can predict this. We have things like the woolly bear caterpillars, the number of frogs in the summer, the Farmer's Almanac. We have the U.S. climate people that do their monitoring, and they do 3-month and 6-month monitoring.
I'm really more interested in if it is, I mean, who knows if it's going to be cold or not, but if it is a very, very cold winter, will that harm the trees if they're planted now? That's my question, really.
Well, that question is all dependent on the quality of those trees. What are their roots like? Did he amend the holes as he plants them? And last winter, we had a couple of severely cold days, much, much harsher than normal, pretty darn late. That's where it's really damaging. If it's just cold, it won't, they're growing all through the fall. And so the answer is really, are they ball and burlapped?
I don't know. We don't have the trees yet.
Okay.
But so you're basically saying, I think if the tree is a good quality tree and it's planted properly.
I think I'd go ahead and plant it, but on the other hand, there's nothing wrong with planting the trees in the spring either. You just have to be prepared for watering. What you want to do if you really have a dry, hot spell. And I've done a couple of site visits where the homeowner, and I'm thinking in particular of one near here, not the one at Bat Cave, but one somewhere around here somewhere. Her landscaper put in dogwoods a little high, and he didn't amend the soil at all. Dogwoods have shallow roots. They need lots of mulch. She didn't put any mulch on top of these. They were really suffering. But it all depends on where they're dug and whether they got a good intact root ball, and so what they're like, yeah.
I'd like to comment on that just a little bit.
Sure.
Everything I have heard, read, seen related to tree planting, the advantage, in fact, I've never seen anything that didn't recommend doing it in the fall. The reason why is that the root system continues to grow all through the winter. It has no demands on it because the top has gone dormant.
Right.
So it's given that root system a chance to go ahead and establish itself before the spring comes. If you wait till the spring, you've got the heat, you've got the drought, things flowering out, leaking out.
Stressing.
The root system hasn't really got itself going to really support it.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's a disadvantage. The other thing I would say that's semi-related is that I did organic certification here in Western Carolina, and every year those people have to do soil samples to see what the status of their soil is. They have to have a report for that. Western North Carolina has terrible phosphorus levels. We have very low phosphorus in our soil. Phosphorus is critical for root development. I would strongly recommend any type of shrub planting or tree planting that you go out and get phosphorus sources and amend your soil. It's almost impossible for you to put too much into the soil so that it will help with that root growth. Yeah.
That's great advice and comments. And I think the point about the root growth in the fall is really important. And remember, think of how seldom we have frozen soil very deep. And I think I'd try to get your guy. I've also been hearing from people that they're having trouble as the economy's picked up. They're having trouble getting their guys to come who used to be reliable because they're being sucked off to big jobs. and so there may be some of that, yeah.
I used to work with a nursery down in Spartanburg, and he said the two most important things whenever you plant it, especially in the winter, mulch, well, you're mentioning,
Yeah.
mulch, and you need to, in the first couple of weeks, and then thereafter, when it gets really dry, make sure they're wet. He said more things get killed because they go into a cold spell in dry soil.
Absolutely.
If the soil is well moistened,
Yeah.
then they'll
That's also a really good point, because we forget, because they're dormant, they've lost their leaves, that the roots are still growing and do need that. So that's a really good point. But always amend those digging holes, you know, in the bigger, wider hole. It's not deepness, it's the width that's so important. Yeah.
What's the viability of birch and willow?
In what sense?
I've seen some birch and some willow in yards that were planted, and I kind of like the plants, but they're not, I don't think they're native. I don't see them growing wild.
We have native birches and native willows. We also have plenty of birches and willows that have come either from the Northeast, like paper birch. River birch is native here. Lots of willows that are native to Europe and to Asia, but so would have to be pretty specific. And for us, our mountains like sweet birch, what's the other one? They're hard to grow at lower elevations when we have a lot of summer heat. Same with some of these, like rhododendrons. As we've gotten hotter in the Piedmont, it's a whole lot harder to grow rhodos than it was 20 years ago. And you have to really make sure they're in amended soil. They're also tricky. Yeah.
About phosphate, I've seen superphosphate around. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's just a higher concentration level. If you go out and buy liquid fertilizers that's like O20, that's an O, the middle number. Bone meal is an example of that. You can buy bags, you can get organic phosphorus in bags, but it's the middle number that you're looking for.
Yeah, and it's also a good point. Happily, North Carolina is the last state that has free soil testing in the country, so take advantage of them, of it, you know, if you want to find out what's going on in your soil. Here are some additional shrubs that I really like to recommend. Spice bush is particularly appropriate. Pawpaws are kind of a thickety, tropical-looking native. Sweet spire, sweet shrubs, mountain laurels, sparkleberries, lots of choices, not always easy to find at nurseries, but if you have a bigger property and can move things around, sparkleberries would be good. I've actually started to see sparkleberries for sale, which is new. Mountain laurels are notoriously hard to get established. Tim and I have killed many by trying, you know, it seems like 1 out of every 5 is in the perfect spot. So if you have them, treasure them. They need absolutely perfect drainage, perfect site. They're prone to root rots like rhododendrons are, but beautiful. Witch hazels. We've got our native eastern witch hazel that turns beautiful, clear yellow in the fall, has lovely flowers in midwinter. There is an Ozark Midwestern witch hazel that's awfully pretty. They're also Chinese species. Now let's just kind of wrap up here talking about some of the favorite woodland wildflowers that are the ones that finally need that really richer soil and to flourish. And they'd be sort of the last thing to plant, or to plant in little pockets where you're going to see and enjoy and treasure them. Tiarella is a less fussy understory woodland wildflower, along with its relative heuchera or coral bell, and both are widely available in the nursery trade. Tiarella is both a rhizomatous, has a rhizomatous